Um, I can laugh at myself. It's okay. I'll just put this out there. We just get it out. Get it all out. Okay? It's all right. There you go. Yep. All right. There we are. Enough of that silliness. Moving on to Hosea. Who's Hosea? Who's Hosea? Prophet. Good. Good. We're making progress. We're off to a good start. Where does Hosea live? Country? Israel. Yeah. How's Israel doing? Good, bad? Oh, bad. Yeah.
Very well politically. And
yeah, very well politically.
Financially.
Financially. Super bad spiritually, right? And for Hosea's very first assignment, hi, I'm the Lord, you're going to be my prophet, Hosea. What's his first assignment? Marry a prostitute. So just not to gloss that over, you're going to get married, and it's not just, you're going to fall in love with a woman, you're going to get married, and not just she's going to be committing adultery, but she's also going to do adultery in exchange for stuff which we call prostitution. Okay? She's going to be doing it in exchange for stuff. And you're going to do that as a metaphor for how Israel treats me, the Lord. Okay? Because that is how I feel right now. And we talked about this, and at this point in these first few chapters, we're gonna use Hosea's relationship as kind of a microcosm of what that looks like. And we talked about how, we even talked about how hard this verse was, that children are being had, that we're actually naming, she's not loved, no pity, because I'm not gonna have pity on Israel. And we have this, and this doesn't feel particularly fair to us, because very often, we're like, well, if someone's doing something bad, well, that shouldn't be taken out on the kids. But the idea here is, I'm not going to do anything to enable, like, these children you've been having with these other men, they are what you've done out of your own behavior. I'm not going to do anything that might reward or enable you, Gomer. Like, I'm not going to do anything that will allow you to continue where you're at. Well, sometimes called Gomer, yeah, because I like it more. It feels more like she's female, so I'm going to stick with that. For their mother has committed adultery, she who conceived them has acted shamefully, for she said, I will seek out my lovers. They are the ones who give me my bread and my water, my wool, my flax, my olive oil, and my wine. And so we see part of Gomer's motivations here. Married to a prophet, you live a fairly meager existence. You live on what other people give you, and so there's not a whole lot of room for nice stuff. And Gomer wants the nice stuff. And so her lovers offer those in exchange for sex, and so she goes to them. Okay? So Hosea is saying this so that a message gets sent, and that's the way Israel is acting. Going and emulating the lifestyles of other nations, because Israel wants stuff. Israel likes this economic prosperity and this political prosperity. And if we emulate the other nations, that's just what everybody else is doing. Am I right? Like, if I do all these things, and if Syria and Egypt, they're worshiping other gods, and like, look how prosperous they are, and we're kind of doing this, and look how prosperous we've become. Well, we must be doing something right, huh? Right? Therefore, I will soon fence her in with thorns. I will wall her in so that she cannot find her way. So she's going to oppose. He's not going to stand passively by and just watch. He's going to make it very clear to everyone that she is going the wrong way. Okay, I'm not going to assist her. I'm going to oppose her actions. And in the same way, God is going to make it very difficult for Israel. I mean, great, you want to pursue idol worship? I'm not going to make it easy for you. Then, get this, she will pursue her lovers, but she won't catch them. She'll seek them, but she'll not find them. And she'll say, I'll go back to my husband, because I was better off then than I am now. Yeah, I mean, Hosea didn't really offer me anything, but I'm not getting all the goods from my lover, so I guess I'll just go back to him. So in the same way, eventually, part of it is Gomer's going to turn back to Hosea out of frustration because the good things that she had are getting cut off from her, and at the same time, Israel's blessings are going to get shut off. And so they may turn back to God out of just frustration. And at this point in the chapter, Hosea's relation, we've been doing this thing where we make these statements, Hosea says these things, and there's this application we make to Hosea's home life, and then there's this relationship with God and Israel. Well, the part about Hosea's relationship kind of fades away at this point, and it becomes almost entirely about God and Israel now. Yet until now, she, Israel, has refused to acknowledge that I was the one who gave her the grain, the new wine, and the olive oil, and that it was I who lavished on her the silver and gold, which they used in worshiping Baal. So, they think that other idols gave them these things, but it was me that gave them all these things. Like, they're where they were. They had this political and economic security, not because they worshipped idols and they gave it to them, but even in their unfaithfulness, I was blessing them. And they won't acknowledge me. So Israel doesn't understand that God gave them these things. It's a huge problem. And they don't even know the scriptures enough to even connect. They don't even know the passages of scripture that say, if you obey me, I'm going to bless you in the land. Like, they're not even really studying the scriptures to understand that. Therefore, I'm going to take back the grain during the harvest time, the new wine when it ripens. I'm going to take away my wool and my flax, which I had provided in order to clothe her. So no more blessings, it's time for curses. Soon I will expose her lewd nakedness in front of her lovers, and no one will be able to rescue her from me. So I'm going to make Israel an embarrassment to the other nations. I'm going to make it right now. They look at Israel and they're like, ooh, Israel's got it pretty good. They're going to look at you and say, ooh, Israel, oh, gosh, you see what they do? I will put an end to all her celebrations, her annual religious festivals, monthly new moon celebrations, weekly Sabbath festivities, all her appointed festivals. I don't even want them to try and worship me. Because it's all fake. It's all fake. I don't even want this I don't even want the pretense to continue. I will destroy her vines and fig trees, about which she said, these are my wages for prostitution that my lovers gave me. I will turn her uncultivated vines and fig trees into an uncultivated thicket, so that wild animals will devour them. Because what that sentence means is, what they're saying is, yeah, we worshipped Baal, the god of fertility, and Baal sent rain and grew up all these great vines and fig trees. Like, we worship these other gods, and the gods send rain. Hey! And that's deeply offensive to God, as it should be. I will punish her for the festival days when she burned incense to the Baal idols. She adorned herself with earrings and jewelry and went after her lovers, but she forgot me, says the Lord. Like, Hosea could have been saying this. And I think that this is very different than Amos was, isn't it? This is judgment out of a broken heart. Israel was in love with God, and then it stopped being in love with God. And now it's turned away, and the Lord is speaking the language of rejection. The Lord is speaking the language of what it's like when the person you love turns away.
And I picture a wife getting ready to go out, and her husband thinks that she's going to some type of a special church function or party with him, and instead she leaves and hits the streets. And how that would make.
And the memories of when she was doing the right thing, and now you know that when she's doing that, she's not anymore. Like when did all those festivals and Sabbaths, when did they all used to mean something? But then they didn't. So, Israel's punishment. That is Israel's punishment. But, however, in the future, I will allure her. I will lead her back into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. I'm going to woo her back to me. From there I will give back her vineyards to her and turn the valley of trouble into an opportunity for hope. Then there she will sing as she did when she was young, when she came up from the land of Egypt. So, first off, this doesn't really mean anything to us. Let me tell you, valley of trouble means something very specific in the Old Testament. There was a time in the book of Joshua where Joshua was trying to conquer all these nations, and this dude named Achan steals a bunch of loot and causes Israel to lose, and they find out, and they take him and all his family to this big valley, and they stone them to death, and they stone so many stones that it leaves this massive pile of stones over their corpses, and they just leave it there as a reminder. And that valley was called the Valley of Trouble. So that everyone could look at that valley and say, this is what happens, a living reminder. Well, I'm going to turn that, so when he says Valley of Trouble, right now, we're in the Valley of Trouble. But one day I'm going to turn that Valley of Trouble, changing the Hebrew name, into an opportunity for hope. There she will sing as she did when she was young, when she came up from the land of Egypt. What are we referring to? Well, when we, in Exodus 15, right after we get out of the Red Sea, Moses and the Israelites are singing to the Lord. It was like the closest to the Lord that they ever were. It didn't last long. But there was this period of time where all of Israel is singing to the Lord. I just gave one verse here, but it lasts an entire chapter. They're so excited about the Lord. They're so in love with the Lord and all that He's done. Again, it didn't last long. But it was there. And He's saying, I'm going to bring her back to that. I'm going to make her fall in love with me again so that she's at the time when we were most in love. Israel and God. And at that time, declares the Lord, you will call my husband. You'll call for me as someone that loves me. You will never again call me my master. Someone that, what's the difference? What's the difference in terms? We're not going to call God this again. We're going to call him this. What's the difference?
Well, for husband, as an equal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Equal. Good. What else?
Not a slave.
Not a slave.
The element of love.
Flesh. Exactly. The element of love is going to be there. Instead of, I have to follow this person because I'm legally obligated to, and they make laws, and I've got to do this stuff for God because He says to, and I've got to do all these things because He tells me to, and then if He does this, if I do this, then He'll do this, and so on and so forth, and I just don't want to get cursed. That's the master relationship. No. Israel's going to do it one day because they want to. This is so applicable for us. We can so easily fall into seeing God this way. And there's nothing wrong with in your prayers referring to God as the master of everything. So don't think I'm saying that. I will very often refer to the Lord in my prayers as the sovereign master. But how are we seeing him in our hearts? As I have to pursue holiness because I have to? Or is there something more there? Is it the tender relationship that exists? You do it because you love him, because we're so full of love for God that we want to do this. And that's going to be the big change.
And Nate, I think that the other difference there is that the master, if we look at it from that side of it, the master really just wants to get things done. There's not that love where the husband wants the bride, in this case, to do something because he loves her, not because he is just interested in something for himself.
Absolutely. Is absolutely right. And there's one, so that is the relational piece. There's a linguistic piece as well that I just want to point out just for your own knowledge. The thing here that only Israel would have gotten and that we don't is this Hebrew word. Okay, so the thing that the God that Israel was worshiping predominantly was Baal. Okay? The word for master, as it turns out, is Baali. And so from just a linguistic perspective, just saying my master, they would have been saying Baali. And that will in the future be like, oh, those were the times when we were worshiping the Baal. So just by the word would have referring to God in the same context as all the idols they would worship. And they're not going to anymore. They're not going to use that word. They're going to use the word for husband. So it's not even going to be close to the same relationship of just lumping God in with all the idols they were worshiping. So an interesting linguistic thing there with the Hebrew. For I will remove the names of the Baal idols from your lips, so that you will never again even utter their names. You won't even think about them. And at that time I will make a covenant for them with the wild animals, the birds of the air, and the creatures that crawl on the ground. I'm going to abolish the warrior's bow and sword, that is, every weapon of warfare from the land. And I will allow them to live securely. Peace. So that there's not even any weapons. Not even any weapons, because you're not gonna need them. It's a difficult message in America where every family needs an AK-47. But that is God's, that's what I'm going to do. You're going to live securely. And then just something really interesting happens is that God becomes very, in my opinion, very unexpectedly tender. God becomes extremely tender. And you can almost picture him standing in front of Israel like a bride, and he says to her, he uses the I will commit myself to you forever. I will commit myself to you in righteousness and justice, in steadfast love and tender compassion. I will commit myself to you in faithfulness. What does that sound like? What does that sound like?
Wedding vows.
It sounds like wedding vows. You get the image of God standing in front of an altar to him, standing with Israel, holding her, metaphorically, her hands, and saying these commitments. Okay? So, just touching, these are God's marital vows to Israel, because she's going to come back to a relationship with him. I'm going to commit myself to you in righteousness. I'm going to show you what's right. I'm going to commit to you in fair treatment, justice, loyal love, just this unswerving commitment that never stops. Compassion, he mentioned, which so that the tender affection piece, and then faithfulness, that God is always going to be there and never end. When we follow the Lord, this is how he's committing to us. if we'll follow him in all these ways. But notice now, I took out half the verse there of 20. I'm going to add the second now. I'll commit myself to you forever. I will commit myself to you in righteousness and justice. This is all one-sided. In steadfast love and tender compassion, I will commit myself to you in faithfulness. What will she do? Then you will acknowledge the Lord. That's the other half for us. Then what you will do is you'll acknowledge me as Lord. You'll worship me. You'll serve me. Like a wedding ceremony in a couple verses. And it's just so interesting to see God speaking in a wedding vows sort of way.
What time, what period is he speaking about?
So okay, good question. It's a time that hasn't happened even yet. Okay, this is end times, where God is going to Jesus is going to return, and Israel is going to see him and is going to fall in love with him. So there's a metaphor for which this is happening right now with the church. Like I would argue that when we come to know the Lord and follow him, this happens when we acknowledge him. But then there's going to be this other perspective where this prophecy is about Israel. One day, Jesus coming back, and through Jesus, Israel coming back to the Lord, and this relationship happening. Okay? And at that time, I will willingly respond, declares the Lord. I will respond to the sky, and the sky will respond to the ground. I'm going to turn on the blessings again. Then the ground will respond to the grain, the wine, and the olive oil, and they will respond to God plants, Jezreel. Who can remember last week? What did Jezreel mean? We named one of the kids Jezreel. Do we remember what that meant? It wasn't no pity, and it wasn't that one. Like, what was it? Anyone remember? God scatters. But then I'm going to turn around the name, and it's going to be God plants. Then I will plant her as my own in the land. I will have pity on no pity. I will say to not my people, you are my people. I will change your name so that you are these things. And he will say, you are my God. So they will say, I'm taking you back, and at the same time, they will say, you are my God. So two things, God will plant Israel in the promised land, and Israel will recognize the Lord. So God used Hosea's marriage to Gomer to demonstrate Israel's unfaithfulness. Okay? Now, in this one really quick chapter, he's going to use it to demonstrate restoration. Check this out. The Lord said to me, Hosea, go, show love to your wife again, even though she loves another man and continually commits adultery. Likewise, the Lord loves the Israelites, although they turn to other gods and love to offer raisin cakes to idols. You need to understand, Israel, that I'm showing you, I don't hate you, I'm showing you the judgments I'm showing you out of love. But I still love you, and I want you to come back even in your idolatry, even in your sin. I still love you. And in the same way, Hosea, I want you to go back. So, I paid 15 shekels of silver and about 7 bushels of barley to purchase her. Because where she has become property of another. Whether the lover that she's with or a pimp. She's property now. So he had to actually buy her back in the same way other men were paying for her. He had to buy her back. just so you know the context. So, how many shekels of silver? 15. In Exodus, just some context for that, if the ox gores a male servant or female servant and then kills that servant, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver and the ox must be stoned. So he paid 15 shekels of silver, and then that barley has some value. So Gomer, at this point, was worth about a dead slave. That is how much she was valued by the people that she was with. She was valued like a corpse might be valued. That's what he paid for her. And it's not, presumably he would have paid more, but she was not valued, and he's taking her back. And I think, I just love, like, the more I look at this, the more I like it. It's just this metaphor for what's happening here. And he takes her back. He buys her back, even though, did she deserve it? She probably didn't deserve it at that point. This is on par with rescuing someone from a crack den. This is on par with taking someone off the streets where they've been for years. The people that have her consider her worth nothing, worth something that is dead, and being rescued from that. And then I told her, you must live with me many days. You're going to stay with me. You must not commit adultery or have sexual intercourse with another man. So, as part of I purchased you, these are my rules. You're going to live just with me. You're not going to live with someone else. You're not going to have sex with another man. And I also will wait for you. I'm not going to be with any other woman. I'm going to wait for you. So just this perfect, we're going to live the life together we should have always lived. And those are the rules when you stay here with me. 4, God continues, the Israelites need to live many days without a king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred fertility pillar, without ephod or idols. In the same way, Israelites, they need to live without all the stuff that they were used to. They kind of need to live without those things so that they can be brought back into relationship. This might not have been easy for Gomer. Like sure, she's been rescued, but she's having to live a very different life than she's been used to for a while. Because she would go back to her lovers when she would want stuff. So Israel needs to go through that as well. And this is Israel's present, is after it is crushed. And in fact, this is the way things are right now. So Israel right now, here. Israel's in this holding pattern without really anything, without a king or a prince, without anybody really leading them in the name of the Lord. But afterward, future, the Israelites will turn and seek the Lord their God and their Davidic king. Who's the Davidic king? Jesus. Then they will submit to the Lord in fear and receive his blessings in the future. So that's all that good stuff about Israel coming back. This is when that happens. When they seek God and the Davidic king. So that's Israel's future that's still to come. So that 1 through 3, that's like the big picture. Okay? Judgment on Israel, and why, and in a nutshell, why there's judgment, okay? But then the restoration that will come one day, when Israel will be brought back. So so the big picture, I won't judge, it can happen to any of us. Unfaithfulness, then judgment, then faithfulness for Israel, then redemption. So that was the big picture that got articulated in those 3 chapters. what he's going to spend the rest of the book doing is he's going to spell out, okay, let me go over these reasons. Let me go over the reasons. I haven't really gone over the reasons. I've just said blanket you're being unfaithful. But let's go into the particulars. Let's go over the particulars. I want to spell out, I need you to know why. How have you been unfaithful? Well, that's really general. It could be a lot of ways. This verse is in a nutshell. Hear the word of the Lord, you Israelites, for the Lord has a covenant lawsuit against the people of Israel. I'm taking you to court for breaching the covenant. For there is neither faithfulness nor loyalty in the land, nor do they acknowledge God. 3 things. 1, 2, 3. 1, there's no faithfulness. And so he listed these first, but then he's going to address them in kind of reverse order, where no faithfulness is going to get addressed last. That you have not been faithful to me. You have not shown any love to me or to each other, no kindness, and you don't acknowledge me at all. And that's where he's actually going to begin, even though that's the last one he listed. Those are the 3 charges. There is only cursing, lying, murder, stealing, adultery. They resort to violence and bloodshed. That's their first line of defense. I have a problem, I will address it with violence. Cursing for us is, this means something different. For us, this means saying dirty words. This, for them, means I am really mad at David, and so I call down a curse on him from the Lord. I curse him in such that I ask the Lord to do something really bad to David because I'm that mad at him. Like that's what we're meaning when we say cursing. And that correlates very well with the violence and bloodshed. And a lot of these are all things they're doing to each other. They're lying to each other. They're cursing each other. They're murdering each other. Stealing, adultery. Things they're doing amongst themselves. This is not, on the surface, looks really great because everything political and economic is going great. But inside, this is what's happening. Therefore the land will mourn, and all its inhabitants will perish. The wild animals, the birds of the sky, and even the fish in the sea will perish. I'm going to bring some super bad drought to just curtail this abundance you've been having. And I'm upset right now with one group in particular, God says, that I'm going to address. I don't want to hear any other accusations right now. My case is against you priests. The ones who should have been the best. Let me just direct things at you real quick. You stumble day and night, and the false prophets stumble with you. You have destroyed your own people. I can't even count on you to lead my people right. You've destroyed my people by you don't even acknowledge me. Because you refuse to acknowledge me, you're not my priests. Because you reject the law of your God, I will reject your descendants. Priests, it was a family affair. So if I'm a priest, my son will be the priest, his son will be the next priest. It went that way. You're not going to be a priest, and your descendants aren't going to be priests anymore. I don't want you as priests at all. The more the priests increase in number, the more they rebelled in me. They've turned their glorious calling into a shameful disgrace. So they're growing, the priests in number, they're growing, but the more they increase, as a way of, hey, like, how can you say that Israel's not serving the Lord? Last year, we only had like 10,000 priests, and this year we have 11,000 priests. That's 10% growth right there. So we have more priests, so that means we're holier. Okay, numbers has nothing to do with it. They feed on the sin offerings of my people. Their appetites long for their iniquity. And so what's happening here is the way the priests got fed is you brought up the offerings for your sin, and the priests would keep a good portion of that, and that would be like how they were fed. So they're not honoring God, but they're still telling the people, you've still sinned, like you still need to come and give your sin offerings regularly, because as your priests, like, bring the bacon into daddy, okay? But they're not honoring God with that, but they're still making out really well. I will deal with the people and priests together. I will punish them both for their ways. I'm going to repay them for their deeds. They're going to eat, but because there's drought, they're not going to be satisfied. They will engage in prostitution, but not increase in numbers. Fertility. Infertility. There's not going to be kids that come out of that because they have abandoned the Lord by pursuing other gods. So the priests are going to die out because the priests are off with prostitutes. So we're just going to make it so that their lines don't increase. They're just not going to have any kids. And then they're not going to enjoy all the profit they're taking because I'm going to have drought, so there's going to be starvation. And then he turns to the citizens. Old and new wine take away the understanding of my people. They're drinking, and as they're drinking, because they spend so much time with their wine, regardless of the kind, like the brand new extra strong kind, and then just kind of the old kind, just to kind of mull over, and they can't focus on me. Fun fact, this is one of the passages, if you look up in the Nazarene Manual, our position on alcohol, this is one of the verses that we use. Which, fun fact, just in case you wanted to know what that was, and even if you didn't, we've got this part called the Covenant of Christian Conduct, because it's my class and I do what I want. In light of the Holy Scriptures, we say in human experience concerning the ruinous consequences of the use of alcohol as a beverage, and in light of the findings of medical science regarding the detrimental effect of both alcohol and tobacco to the body and mind, as a community of faith committed to the pursuit of a holy life, our position and practice is abstinence rather than moderation. And here's the key passage of all that I find most pertinent. The widespread incidence of alcohol abuse in our world demands that we embody a position that stands as a witness to others. We see alcohol destroying our society. We've got Alcoholics Anonymous groups everywhere, and I'm glad they're there, don't get me wrong, but they're there because there's lots of people in them. Alcohol abuse is just a part of our society that we don't even, it doesn't even really surprise us because we're just used to it, we're very used to it. And because of that, we take a stand because of one of the verses, old and new wine just takes away my people's understanding. When they're spending their time drinking, and regardless of the level you drink, when they spend their time drinking, they can't focus on me. And that's the case when they're drinking. They're focused on other stuff, but they're not focused on me because they're focused on pleasure. And so, as a community, we want to take a stand differently. Okay, we want to take a stand differently. There are other passages. That is not the only one, but since they call out that passage specifically, I thought I'd touch on it. Okay? So we're trying to make a statement of what a society might look like if it was aligned around something a little bit different. They consult their wooden idols. Their diviner staff answers with an oracle. The wind of prostitution blows them astray. They commit spiritual adultery against their God. So, this is what they're doing. They sacrifice on the mountaintops, burnt offerings on the hills. They sacrifice under oak, poplar, and terebinth because their shade is so pleasant. They don't even really want to go to a temple. They just want to, it's much more comfortable in the shade. So we're just going to go and have a picnic lunch underneath a nice tree and then set up our idol there so that we can kind of worship while we're comfortable. Everything will just be great. As a result, your daughters have become cult prostitutes. They have served, when you're serving fertility gods, sexual activity is part of how you worshipped. So that's what your daughters are doing. And your daughters-in-law commit adultery. But just so you men don't think, oh gosh, it's all the women, I'm not just going to punish the daughters when they commit prostitution or your daughter-in-laws, for the men are doing it too. The men are also spending their time with the temple prostitutes. And it's true, a people that lacks understanding will come to ruin. There's no understanding, there's no following me, and this is where they are. is just serving idols wholeheartedly with their own, in their own time and in their own comfort. And then what does that manifest itself as? Is a lot of sexual immorality, and they spend a lot of time with their wine. They spend a lot of time in wine and pleasure, and that's where they live. This will continue, but this is the stage. This is the stage they set. Okay? We have to kind of understand and allow ourselves to be convicted by like where unfaithfulness leads before we can even have restoration. Have a good week.
Abundance of wine, that's problem. How about today, Anthony, you quit, of course, other churches do wine, but
Certainly. So, yeah, I
They
don't,
have
I personally would not